welcome to our Game of Thrones discussion. Today we are going to be talking about Season 7, Episode 3 of Game of Thrones, titled The Queen's Justice. But we're not going to be talking about Cersei Lannister, which is what the title comes from. We're going to be talking about
a different queen
and a king of the north. We're going to be talking about when fire finally met ice, with Jon Snow and Daenerys finally meeting each other. And we're not just going to be talking about the scene where they initially meet, but we're just going to be talking about what that means for them coming together, what was coming out of their conversations, where we think that's going, that kind of thing. Not what we're focusing on for today's discussion. For the full discussion of the episode, we are going to talk about it in our podcast, which we record every Thursday. So tune in, be available first thing in the morning on Friday. Hear us talking about the other episode then. But for the video discussions, we just picked the one kind of important part that we want to discuss. So first things off, right off the bat, Jon shows up on Dragonstone Island.
They announce Daenerys. She has an embarrassingly long list of titles.
Yes.
Jon has no titles, except for, except for King of the North. That was
funny.
That was hilarious.
Daenerys, breaker of chain, mother of dragons, the Stormborn.
I was like,
the Khaleesi of the Great Sea.
And
and then Davos is all, this is Jon Snow.
Yeah, this is Jon Snow.
In the north.
This is actually kind of a tense encounter because Daenerys is quite demanding that Jon Snow bend the knee to her, and Jon's refusing on that part.
The thing is that we know as an audience that these two should get along like gangbusters.
Right?
We know that because we've don't know each other. They don't know this, so they don't see what the audience is seeing. They're seeing kind of their past differences. So Daenerys is seeing the son of somebody who rebelled against her family, who was involved in kind of like the slaughter of her family, even though Ned didn't really want to be involved in any of that.
Right.
He was involved. He was friends with King Robert, who was.
In fact, Ned walked away from all of that.
Yeah.
It was mostly Robert and the Lannisters who did all the killing. But, of course, she doesn't know that.
And on the other hand, to Jon Snow, Daenerys is the daughter of the Mad King who brutally murdered his uncle and grandfather and kicked off this rebellion and almost destroyed the entire realm. All of this kind of shit that went down is all basically at the foot of her father. So, to him, it's like, okay, so you've come here with giant magical beast, an army of Dothraki foreigners, unsullied.
Right.
So why should I trust you? She's like, why should I trust you? And he's like, why should I trust you? And they're kind of... Basically, our conversation going back and forth is them saying that over and over.
Well, they managed to keep it civil. They come to some understanding. Daenerys kind of holds Jon on Dragonstone while she's figuring out what to do. Tyrion has a conversation with Daenerys where Daenerys gets the news about what happened last episode. She's lost some forces, so she's a little down and out.
The total destruction of her fleet.
Yeah, the total destruction of her fleet. And so Tyrion, after having talked to Jon Snow, because it's the big point where they differ isn't even the fact that Jon refuses to bend the knee. It's the fact that Jon refuses to even fight in the war against Cersei because Jon doesn't see Cersei as the threat. Jon knows that the threat is the White Walkers, the army of the dead. And when he tells Daenerys this, Daenerys doesn't believe him. It sounds ridiculous.
It's funny because she's having the reaction to his story.
Yeah.
A lot of people were having when news first started spreading about her having dragons.
Right.
It's like she of all people should be able to kind of take the moment and go well, I do have dragons, so I've seen wizards.
Right. I think also part of that with Daenerys is the fact that she has tunnel vision. She's focused on taking the Iron Throne, taking it from Cersei. So she's not going to be easily swayed from that, especially with stories about zombies coming to kill everybody. So that's really the big point because she wants Jon to help her fight Cersei, and Jon's just like, we don't have time for that. You understand? That's nothing. Who cares about Cersei? So that's really the big point where they differ. So Tyrion has a talk with Daenerys, and Tyrion reminds her that Jon is a potential ally, a valuable ally, and that because Tyrion had talked to Jon, and Tyrion found out through Jon Snow that Jon Snow basically wants the dragon glass that can be mined there. And Tyrion convinces Daenerys to let Jon mine the dragon glass.
Which is worthless to her. It means nothing.
It means she didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
And so at that point, coming to the end of the scene, Daenerys and Jon Snow reach an agreement to where Jon Snow can mine the dragon glass. They don't come to a formal alliance. The differences that stood between them when the scene first began still exist where we leave off here. But at the very
Jon's
least,
thankful, but
yeah.
But there's, the last thing he asks her is, does that mean you believe me? And she says, you better get going, which is kind of dismissive. He's going to need proof. I think the kind of forces in Westeros that are behind Cersei now, whether she makes it or not, are going to need proof.
Yep. This
is kind of the direction we're heading in, so that people need proof that this is real before it's like on their doorsteps. Cutting them open.
Yeah, before the proof is like literally breaking down their doors. Yeah, I mean, they'll get proof one way or another. Also in the scene when Davos is talking, because there's this little back and forth between Daenerys and Jon Snow, where Daenerys tells Jon her entire history, what she's been through, what she's had to do to get to where she is. And then Davos, for Jon, recounts to Daenerys everything Jon has done, what Jon has had to go through to get to where he is. And in that little speech, Davos lets slip that Jon's been stabbed in the heart. Mm-hmm. That seems to go unnoticed until Daenerys is speaking with Tyrion, and Daenerys suddenly says, what did Davos mean by Jon being stabbed in the heart? And Tyrion kind of hand waves it away.
Just ignore their flights of fancy. The North is dreary.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Jon Snow is trying to keep that secret from her, Just for context, other things that kind of happened in this episode that kind of relate towards what's happening with Jon and Daenerys now. Jorah is now cured of grayscale at the hands of Sam, so he's going back to meet up with Daenerys. We don't know if he even knows that she's a Dragonstone yet, but that's become pretty publicly known. So I imagine that he'll find that out.
He'll find that out.
His way there.
Yeah.
When he does, he'd be encountering Jon, who is best friends with Sam, and that could speak towards Jon's favor, that Jon's friend saved his life.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that can work towards Jon's favor.
Another point of context you already kind of hinted at, which is that Daenerys' plans through Tyrion are not going particularly well. So securing another ally is very important, to accept some things at face value that she's not ready to, in order to kind of create an alliance with Jon.
She can't afford not to have that alliance.
And lastly, Melisandre is kind of still there, but hiding away from Jon and Davos.
Oh, yeah.
Because Davos basically said he'd kill her.
Especially Davos.
Again. Yeah. And she said, I've already kind of served my purpose in bringing you two together. I'm going to get out of here. Varys is
there's this tense conversation with her and Varys. Varys hates her. You could tell there's some major animosity between Varys and her, even if she doesn't have a particular animosity to Varys, but Varys is very bothered by her. And so he confronts her, he's asking her why she's hiding, as a way of taunting her, teasing her, maybe trying to get some information about her from her that he could use against her. It's not a friendly manner in which he approaches her.
No, not at all.
Not at all. He comes at her, and she very calmly explains, what's going on. She admits she's hiding from Jon Snow and Davos because of mistakes that she's made. And then that's when Varys tells her, get out, leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't come back, or something bad could happen to you. And she says, I have to come back here. And he starts piping in you hold on now or something. And he cuts him off very quickly and says, I have to come back to this strange land to die.
Just like you.
And that rattles Varys.
Yeah, he's shaken at the end of that conversation.
He does not like magic, and he does not like magic involved in his fate.
No, at all. No, he doesn't.
So that's it for the actual events of that scene.
I really love the interplay between Daenerys and Jon Snow. I loved how you can tell through their exchanges how similar they are to each other.
Yeah.
And that And
even
that
said, like, would you hold a daughter accountable for the sins of her father? Which is remarkably close to what Jon said in the first episode about not holding sons accountable for the actions of their fathers when he referred to the Umbers and Karstarks.
Yes.
So there's even they're even quoting things remarkably similar, you know,
each other. You could tell just from them talking to each other that they're both stubborn. They both have a sort of righteous attitude, like they know what's right, and they're not going to back down from that.
Let me ask you one question. Do you think it's going to come out, Jon's origin, as his secret Targaryen origin? Do you think that's going to come out to him or to Daenerys or to anybody in the kind of wider sphere of this in this season?
If it comes out, it's going to come out to Sansa, because Bran arrives at Winterfell and Sansa finds him and takes him in. And I think if it comes up at all, the first person to probably find out is going to be Sansa.
She could, but Bran said that he needed it to Jon, so he might not necessarily impart that knowledge to Sansa.
Oh, he might be saving it for Jon.
There's a lot to talk about there, too, but we're going to save that for the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
This is just about Fire Meets Ice, this part right here. So, two of the kind of like big central characters have met up now. So there's a lot about them meeting, you know, and right now it's kind of on a tense first footing.
Well, the entire series is named A Song of Ice and Fire. And I think now it's reasonable to conclude that Jon is the ice and Daenerys is the fire. So I think you're getting why if anybody is a central character in the show, it's them two, or maybe even just Jon himself is the show's central character. I think that's becoming clearer now as we march towards the end of the series.
I'm kind of glad that she's kind of holding him partially against his will on the island, because it means that it's not like this chance encounter, it's going to go away and we're going to have to wait for another one. We have time to kind of create interactions with each other.
Right.
While they're here, and maybe discover a bit about each other and how similar they are and how likewise their ideas are. The fact that they're, like Tyrion said, that they both protect people from monsters.
Right, exactly. So I find that good, you know, that Jon can't just leave, you know, and cut these encounters short.
Even though it means that the longer Jon's away from Winterfell, the longer it's going to take for Bran to talk to him.
Yeah, exactly, right. And tell him the secret.
That's it for our discussion. Like I said, we're talking about the entire episode on our podcast, which records on Thursday and will be available the first thing on Friday. That's the Weekly Set podcast. You can look that up on a podcast. It's also up here on YouTube along with this video. So yeah, check that out. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out our site, TVEnthusiast.com, our podcast, The Weekly Set, everything else that we're doing. Until then, until next time.